During the weeks and months that follow, this 6-year-old's seizures increase radically in frequency, intensity, and duration. In the aftermath, the child's neurologists point out that stressful situations like the one that Jack endured at the hands of Kelle Wood Rich have to be avoided because of the significant risk of morbidity, death, that undue stress poses for children with epilepsy. Kelle Wood Rich could have learned this, but she did not make any efforts to meet with Jack's doctors before she set in on him and tried to impose and did impose all of this stress upon him in his kindergarten classroom. Now, Kelle Wood Rich is able to rationalize this all away. She insists in writing that rounding up 5 other adults to intentionally evoke defiance, rage, anger, and despair in small children is research-based and scientific. So too evidently is pinioning these children to the concrete classroom floor. She's not a scientist. She has no medical training in her background. Kelle Wood Rich even claims that Dr. Carbone's teachings justify her disgraceful actions. Remember, anyone who is capable of faking a Ph.D. for over a decade is capable of anything. These days, unfortunately, rationalizing abuse is not unheard of. There was, very recently, a highly publicized criminal trial involving a doctor who was abusing female gymnasts who were training for the Olympics. At the sentencing hearing, even this doctor did not possess the nerve, the audacity, to claim that he was acting in self-defense when he assaulted his young patients. But he did tell the judge that he'd been utilizing research-based and scientific methods. The judge repudiated the doctor's claims that he'd helped the victims, and the judge imposed the maximum punishment. Fortunately, the victims in that abuse case had had their day in court and had been allowed to counter the doctor's claims to scientific purity. Unfortunately and undoubtedly, some of the children who've been subjected to Kelle Wood Rich's methods over the years have not had the same opportunity to speak out. For some of these children, this is because they are physiologically incapable of speech or are speech delayed, like the epileptic kindergartner in Austin. When all of Kelle Wood Rich's flimsy justifications are dismissed, it can be tempting to speculate as to the real reason. She insists on going behind the backs of doctors and parents to go after small, defenseless children with special needs using methods that shock the conscience. Is Kelle Wood Rich herself a former abuse victim who has allowed herself to be caught in a vicious cycle? We don't know. Whatever the cause of Kelle Wood Rich's behavior, it is historically relevant to understand that Kelle Wood Rich has absolutely no credibility. Dr. Sundberg, Dr. Carbone, and Dr. McGreevy, you must be prepared when the conferees at the Verbal Behavior Conference ask you about this relevant history. Do not choose ignorance as a basis for inaction. To accept Kelle Wood Rich's excuses, rationalizations, and justifications at face value would be to consciously choose ignorance over the overwhelming evidence of malpractice, abuse, and fraud contained in the federal magistrate's authoritative report and in other credible primary sources. Do not turn away from this mountain of evidence. Just remember that this mountain of evidence pointing to malpractice, abuse, and fraud has not been compiled by persons who have faked an advanced degree for over a decade. These credible sources can be easily found, and I offer you my help. You need only ask. What your disgraced colleague, Kelle Wood Rich, has to teach us at the Verbal Behavior Conference is not the content of her presentations. Rather, her publicly reported actions contained in credible primary sources are what inform us. They are object lessons in precisely what not to do. For that reason, I recommend that you make a panel discussion about her malpractice, abuse, and fraud a precondition to your participation in the Verbal Behavior Conference. Doing so will send a clear message to conferees who will attend the panel discussion that 3 of the leading lights in the field do not tolerate malpractice, abuse, or fraud. Now remember that recent prominent case involving the doctor who was abusing the female gymnasts? The victims warned scores of adults about the doctor's abuse. The adults dragged their feet or ignored these warnings altogether for far too long. And the resulting human suffering that could have been avoided continued for far too long. Do not repeat this mistake. Let it be said instead that your repudiation of Kelle Wood Rich's dangerous behavior put a stop to abuse being suffered by the least amongst us. Let it be a forceful reminder that all persons analyzing special needs children must do so at the highest level of ethical standards. Thank you.